My name is Hale, and at 22 I finally heard the words that defined my entire relationship with my father. "You're still the joke," he sneered, as I stood in my graduation gown. Years of being the family punching bag flashed before my eyes. I simply jangled my new house keys and said, "Laugh now." Their smirks faded instantly, but they had no idea about the secret I was about to reveal. Before I share how I turned my family's mockery into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and like if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who never believed in you. Growing up in Lakeside, Michigan wasn't easy with a father like Marcus. Our modest two-story house on Maple Street might have looked normal from the outside, but inside those walls I was always measuring up short. My father built his construction business from the ground up, and he expected his sons to mirror his grit, determination, and business sense. My older brother Grant had no problem fitting that mold. 6 feet 2 inches tall, by 10th grade captain of the football team, straight A student. He was everything my father wanted in a son. Then there was me, skinny, quiet Hale with a preference for computers over construction books over baseball. My mother Diane tried to bridge the gap between my father and me, but she was a peacekeeper by nature. She'd smooth things over with gentle words and homemade cookies, rather than confront the growing resentment building within our household walls. "He's just different, Marcus," she'd say softly, after my father spent an evening criticizing my interests. "Not everyone is meant to follow the same path." But my father would just shake his head. "Different isn't what builds character or success. The boy needs to toughen up." I can still remember my 8th birthday when I unwrapped a chemistry set with trembling excitement. Most kids wanted video games or bikes, but I'd been fascinated by science since watching a documentary about inventors on television. My father watched with barely concealed disappointment as I excitedly examined each test tube. "Science experiments. What are you going to do with that?" he scoffed. "Build yourself some friends." Grant laughed, and even though my mother shot them both a disapproving look, the damage was done. I packed the chemistry set away that night and didn't touch it for months. Middle school marked the official beginning of the joke nickname. I had spent weeks preparing for the 7th grade science fair, building a computer program that could solve simple math equations. It wasn't revolutionary, but I was proud of teaching myself basic coding from library books. The night before the fair, my father walked past my room and saw me practicing my presentation. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to my computer screen. I explained my project with nervous enthusiasm, hoping this might be the moment he'd finally show interest in something I created. He stared at the screen for a long moment before laughing. "This is what you're presenting. The Peterson boy built a working robot arm last year, and you're showing them a calculator. That's a joke, Hale." The next day, when my program crashed during the presentation due to a last-minute bug I hadn't caught, I could almost hear my father's words echoing in my head. I came home with a participation ribbon instead of the blue one I'd hoped for. My father took one look and shook his head. Like I said, a joke. The nickname stuck. Whenever I suggested an idea or shared a thought at dinner, my father would often respond with, "Here comes another joke from Hale." Sometimes Grant would join in, though I occasionally caught looks of sympathy from him when our father was being particularly harsh. Our extended family gatherings became exercises in humiliation. My father would parade Grant's achievements, football trophies, academic awards, student council positions, while introducing me as our other son, the family joke. My cousins learned not to take me seriously, and my uncles would ruffle my hair with pity in their eyes. By 16, I had developed a protective shell of quiet determination. My father hosted a dinner for my birthday, inviting our neighbors and a few relatives. After the awkward singing of Happy Birthday, he stood up to make a toast. "To Hale, who turned 16 today," he said, raising his glass. "Still waiting to see what you'll make of yourself, son. Maybe this year will be when you finally get serious." I remember the burn of embarrassment as everyone's eyes turned to me. "Actually," I said quietly, "I've been thinking about studying computer science in college." The table fell silent for a moment before my father burst out laughing. "Computer science. You can barely operate your alarm clock. Let's be realistic. You'll probably end up working for your brother someday." That night, alone in my room, I made a silent promise to myself. I would prove him wrong. no matter what it took. I threw myself into learning everything I could about programming, staying late at school to use the computer lab, and reading technical manuals that most kids my age would find impenetrably boring. I wasn't just building skills. I was building armor against my father's constant criticism. What my family didn't see was that with every dismissive comment, every comparison to Grant or our more successful relatives, they were forging something in me that would eventually become unbreakable. A resolve that grew stronger with each mocking remark. I just had to bide my time and wait for the right moment to show them who I really was. High school should have been a fresh start, but Lakeside High was just another battlefield where I struggled to find my place. The social hierarchy was clearly established, athletes at the top, then student government types, then the artsy crowd, and somewhere near the bottom, the tech-obsessed kids like me. Grant had graduated 2 years before I started, but his shadow still loomed large. Teachers would see my last name on their roster and immediately brighten. "Another Wilson. Are you anything like your brother?" they'd ask on the first day. I'd shrug and mumble something non-committal, already knowing what their faces would look like when they realized the truth. Disappointment became a familiar response I could spot within seconds. Junior year brought the one bright spot in my educational experience up to that point, Mr. Finley's introduction to computer science class. While most teachers saw me as Grant's underwhelming younger brother, Mr. Finley saw potential. "You have a mind for this," he told me, after I'd finished a coding assignment in half the allocated time. "Most students follow the instructions exactly as written, but you found a more efficient solution. That's real programming thinking." For the first time, someone was recognizing something in me that had nothing to do with Grant or my father's expectations. I started spending lunch periods in Mr. Finley's classroom working on extra projects and learning languages that weren't part of the curriculum. When college application season rolled around, Mr. Finley called me into his classroom after school. "Have you thought about where you're applying?" he asked, leaning against his desk. I shook my head. "My father expects me to work for his company after graduation. College isn't really in the plan." Mr. Finley frowned. "Hail, with your skills you could get into a good computer science program. Probably with scholarship money." The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. That night at dinner, I gathered my courage and brought up the subject. "I've been looking into college programs for computer science," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I passed the potatoes to Grant. My father set down his fork. "College with what money? And for what purpose? I need help at the company. Your brother will be taking over management eventually, and you can handle inventory and ordering. No need for some fancy degree to do that." "But I could build better systems for the company with proper training," I argued. "Modernize everything." My father laughed. "The systems work fine as they are. We don't need your science fiction ideas complicating things." Later that night, my mother knocked softly on my bedroom door. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little. "Your father means well," she said, her standard opening line for these conversations. "He just wants security for you." "He doesn't believe I can succeed," I replied, staring at my ceiling. She was quiet for a moment. "If college is really what you want, I can help with the applications. Just don't tell your father yet." Over the next few weeks, my mother and I worked on applications in secret. Mr. Finley helped too, writing a glowing recommendation letter and reviewing my essays. Grant caught me working on an application one evening when he came into my room without knocking. "College, huh?" he said, picking up one of the brochures. "Dad's going to flip." I waited for him to make some joke or threat to tell our father, but instead, he sat down on my desk chair. "You know you're actually pretty good with computers," he said awkwardly. "Better than I am anyway." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given me. The moment passed quickly when he added, "Still, don't get your hopes up. Dad's not going to pay for it, and those places are expensive." What Grant didn't know was that I'd been saving money for years. Every birthday check from grandparents, every dollar earned mowing lawns or shoveling snow, every summer job paycheck, all squirreled away in an account my mother helped me open. It wasn't enough for 4 years. Not even close. But it was something. In April, a large envelope arrived from State University. I'd been accepted to their computer science program with a partial scholarship that would cover about half the tuition. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Mr. Finley had been right. I could do this. Telling my father was every bit as difficult as I'd anticipated. He didn't yell. That almost would have been easier. Instead, he looked at me with something between pity and disgust. "You'll drop out within a semester," he said with certainty. "When reality hits and you realize you're not cut out for it, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms. You want to waste your time and money? That's your choice." The day I left for college, my mother hugged me tightly in the driveway, while my father watched from the porch, arms crossed. Grant had already returned to his job in Detroit and wasn't there. "Prove them wrong," my mother whispered in my ear. "But also do it for yourself." As I drove away in my beat-up used car packed with everything I owned, I felt equal parts terror and exhilaration. For the first time in my life, I was escaping the suffocating weight of being the joke. Whether I succeeded or failed, at least I would do it on my own terms. The State University campus sprawled across 200 acres of rolling hills and modern buildings. My first week there was overwhelming. Thousands of students rushing between classes, professors, with expectations far beyond high school level, and the sudden freedom of living away from home. My roommate Tyler was a music major who practiced saxophone at odd hours, but respected my space and never made me feel like an inconvenience, a novel experience after years of living with my family. That first semester nearly proved my father right. The introductory computer science courses moved at a brutal pace, assuming background knowledge I hadn't gained at my small-town high school. I spent countless late nights in the computer lab, struggling to catch up, while many of my classmates breezed through assignments. After bombing my first major programming exam, I sat alone in my dorm room contemplating calling home and admitting defeat. I could almost picture my father's satisfied expression. The thought of that face was enough to make me pull my textbook back open, instead of reaching for my phone. "You're not getting it because you're trying to memorize instead of understand," a voice said from the doorway. Andrea, a girl from my programming class who always sat in the front row, was leaning against my door frame. "Some of us are forming a study group. You should join." That study group saved my academic career. Andrea, with her methodical approach to problem solving, helped me build a foundation that my high school education had lacked. By the end of the semester, I was keeping pace with the class and even excelling in certain areas. When my final grades posted, 3 B's and 2 A's, I took a screenshot but didn't send it to my parents. This victory was for me alone. Sophomore year brought new challenges and opportunities. My programming skills had improved enough that one of my professors recommended me for an internship at Tech Solutions, a small company that developed inventory management software for local businesses. The pay was minimal, but the experience was valuable. For the first time, I saw how the concepts from my classes applied to real-world problems. "You have good instincts," my supervisor commented after I suggested a more efficient way to structure their database. "Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions that escape the rest of us." That summer, instead of returning home, I stayed near campus and continued working at Tech Solutions. My mother called weekly, but my father never came to the phone. Grant called once sounding stressed. "Dad's been on a tear lately," he said. "The business is having some problems with suppliers and tracking orders. Everything's a mess." I thought about the inventory systems I'd been working on at my internship. Has he considered updating his management software? There are better systems now. Grant snorted. "You know, Dad. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. And even if it is broken, just work harder with what you've got." When junior year started, I returned to campus with a new perspective and a budding idea. The problems my father's business was experiencing were exactly what modern inventory management systems were designed to solve. What if I could build something better than what was currently on the market? Something streamlined and intuitive enough that even my technologically resistant father could use it. Professor Hernandez's advanced software development course provided the perfect opportunity to explore this idea. While other students created games or social media clones, I pitched an inventory management system specifically designed for small construction and contracting businesses. Ambitious Professor Hernandez noted when I presented my project proposal, but also practical. I like it. Over the next months, Professor Hernandez became the mentor I'd never had. He challenged my thinking, suggested resources, and occasionally shared stories from his own journey, from a small town in New Mexico to becoming a respected computer scientist. My father wanted me to take over the family restaurant, he told me once, as we troubleshooted a particularly tricky section of code. He didn't speak to me for 2 years after I left for college. Now he brags to all his customers about his professor's son. Sometimes people just need time to adjust their expectations. I didn't tell him that I doubted my father would ever adjust his expectations. Instead, I channeled my frustration into my project, working late into the night after finishing assignments for other classes. Near the end of junior year, I received a rare call from my father. His voice sounded strained. "Your mother wants to know if you're coming home for the summer," he said without preamble. "I'm staying here," I replied. "I've got an internship and a project I'm working on." He was silent for a moment. "Grant is having trouble at his job. Might be coming back to work for me for a while." The news surprised me. Grant had always been the golden child, the one who would succeed effortlessly. "What happened?" I asked. "Economy's tough. Company downsizing. Not important," my father said dismissively. "Your mother wants to see you. At least come for a weekend." The brief visit home that followed was tense. Grant was indeed back working for our father and living in his old bedroom. He seemed subdued, his confidence dented by his professional setback. My father was visibly stressed with new lines around his eyes and a perpetual frown. "Business is down 15% from last year," my mother confided when we had a moment alone. "Your father won't admit it, but they're struggling to keep track of jobs and materials. Everything's still done on paper, and with the volume they're handling now, it's becoming unmanageable." I thought about my project now taking shape back in my dorm room computer. It was designed precisely for businesses like my father's, but offering help felt like setting myself up for another round of mockery. "Grant mentioned your project," my mother continued. "Something about inventory. Maybe you could show them when it's finished." I nodded noncommittally, but on the drive back to campus, my mind was racing. What if my software could save my father's business? Would that finally earn his respect, or would he find some way to dismiss my contribution as he always had? Back at school, I threw myself into perfecting my project with renewed determination. This was no longer just a class assignment. It was becoming my mission. The joke was about to deliver the punchline. Senior year arrived with a sense of both urgency and possibility. My inventory management system, which I'd named Construct Track, had evolved from a class project into something with genuine commercial potential. Professor Hernandez had been so impressed with my junior year prototype that he'd arranged for me to continue development as an independent study. "This could be more than a grade hail," he told me, examining the user interface I'd designed. "With some refinement, this could be your ticket to the industry." I dedicated every spare moment to Construct Track. While my classmates were attending football games or campus parties, I was in the computer lab refining code and adding features specifically designed for construction businesses. Tyler would occasionally drag me out for pizza, concerned that I was working myself into exhaustion. "Dude, when's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" he asked one night, sliding a slice toward me. "I'll sleep after graduation," I replied, but accepted the food gratefully. Andrea had become a regular collaborator, lending her expertise to the database architecture and challenging my assumptions about user behavior. "Construction guys aren't going to navigate through 3 menus to find inventory status," she pointed out during one late-night session. "They need to see everything important at a glance." Her insights were invaluable, and our working relationship gradually evolved into something more. Late nights coding turned into late nights talking about our backgrounds, ambitions, and the families that had shaped us. "My parents wanted me to be a doctor," she confided. "They immigrated from the Philippines so their children could have prestigious careers. Computer science was a compromise. Not medicine, but still respectable. They're coming around now that they see I'm good at it." "At least they wanted something impressive for you," I said. "My father would be happier if I were stocking shelves in his warehouse." In November, the university hosted its annual tech showcase. Students presented their projects to professors, local business leaders, and a few venture capitalists looking for the next big idea. Professor Hernandez insisted I enter Construct Track. "You've built something that solves a real problem," he said. Let's see if the market agrees. I spent weeks preparing my presentation, running through it with Andrea and Tyler, until I could explain Construct Track's features and benefits in my sleep. The day of the showcase, I dressed in the one suit I owned, purchased for job interviews, and set up my demonstration station with shaking hands. The first few visitors to my booth were politely interested, asking basic questions about functionality and asking for my contact information. Then a man in an expensive suit stopped by watching my demonstration with unusual intensity. "You built this yourself?" he asked when I'd finished my pitch. With some input from colleagues, I acknowledged. "But yes, it's my project." The man handed me his business card. Robert Chen, partner at Horizon Venture Capital. "I've been looking at the construction software space for a while," he said. "Most existing solutions are clunky, expensive, or both. This looks promising. Can we set up a meeting next week?" That meeting led to another, and then another. By January, Robert had introduced me to his partners, and they were talking terms for seed funding. The numbers they mentioned made my head spin. Enough money to turn Construct Track from a student project into a real startup. "We'd want you to finish your degree," Robert explained. "But we'd provide funding for you to hire developers and get this to market. You'd maintain significant equity as founder and CEO. CEO. The title seemed absurd applied to me, the family joke. Yet here was a team of experienced investors willing to bet real money that I could lead a technology company. With graduation approaching in May, everything accelerated. I signed the funding agreement in March, with Tyler and Andrea agreeing to join as co-founders. We rented a small office near campus and started interviewing additional developers. The local business journal ran a small article about our seed round, which I nervously shared with my mother via email. "This is wonderful news, honey," she replied. "I showed your father. He was impressed, I could tell, though you know how he is about showing it." I doubted that very much, but appreciated her attempt at encouragement. In April, with our first version of Construct Track nearly ready for beta testing with local contractors, I received another unexpected call from Grant. "So you're some hotshot startup founder now," he began, his tone unreadable. "We're just getting started," I said cautiously. "But yeah, we got some investment." "Dad's been weird about it," Grant continued. "When Mom showed him that article, he got all quiet, then said something about how anyone can talk a good game, but execution is what matters." I wasn't surprised. "And what do you think?" Grant hesitated. I think the business could use something like what you're building. Things are getting worse here, Hale. Dad's too proud to admit it, but we're losing jobs because of mistakes in ordering and scheduling. Last week, we held up a whole project because someone forgot to order enough drywall. The client was furious. It was the first time Grant had ever acknowledged needing my help with anything. Before I could respond, he continued in a rush. "Look, I tried to convince Dad to modernize last year. Brought in some consultant who wanted to charge a fortune for software that looked like it was built in the 90s. Dad shot it down, said it was too expensive and complicated. But maybe if it came from you." He's never listened to me before, I reminded him. "Things are different now," Grant insisted. "The business is in real trouble, and you've got actual investors backing you. Just think about it." Okay. The conversation left me conflicted. Part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, felt satisfaction at the thought of my father's business struggling while I was succeeding. But another part remembered the employees I'd known growing up, people who depended on Wilson Construction for their livelihoods. With the first installment of funding in our company bank account, I made a decision that surprised even me. I put in an offer on a small house near the university, nothing fancy but my own place purchased with my own money. The closing was scheduled for the week before graduation. As I signed the mountain of paperwork and received my house keys, I felt a surge of accomplishment unlike anything I'd experienced before. This was tangible proof of my success, something not even my father could dismiss. In my pocket, the keys jingled with promise, not just of a home but of a future I was building on my own terms. With graduation a week away, I sent a formal invitation to my parents and Grant. Whether they would come, and what would happen when they did, remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't dreading my father's judgment. I had something real to show him, and no matter what he said, no one could take that away. Graduation morning arrived with a perfect blue sky and mild temperature that the university president would later call auspicious in his address to the graduating class. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie beneath the ceremonial robe, trying to quiet the butterflies in my stomach. Today marked not just the completion of my degree, but a moment of truth with my family. Tyler knocked on my bedroom door. Car just pulled up outside. Michigan plates. I took a deep breath. Thanks. I'll be right out. My parents and Grant were standing awkwardly in my living room when I emerged. My mother immediately rushed forward to hug me, her eyes already misting with tears. "Oh, Hale, we're so proud of you, graduating with honors." My father hung back hands in his pockets, surveying my new home with a critical eye. "Place needs work," he commented, nodding toward a small water stain on the ceiling. "I just closed last week," I replied evenly. "Plenty of time for improvements." Grant stepped forward, offering his hand in an unexpectedly formal gesture. "Congratulations, bro. Computer science, huh? Never thought you'd stick with it." The drive to campus was filled with my mother's nervous chatter about the neighbors back home, and Grant's occasional comments about the university buildings. My father remained largely silent, radiating discomfort at being in territory where his usual authority held no sway. As we approached the auditorium, I spotted Andrea waving to me from the line of graduates. "I need to get to my place," I said, relieved for the excuse to separate from my family. "You should find seats. It gets crowded." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches and names. When the dean of the computer science department took the podium for a special announcement, I was only half listening until I heard my name. This year's Innovation in Applied Technology Award goes to Hale Wilson for his development of ConstructTrack, a software solution already attracting industry attention before its official launch. Mr. Wilson exemplifies the entrepreneurial spirit we seek to foster at this institution. A surprised murmur went through the crowd as I made my way to the podium. I hadn't applied for the award. Professor Hernandez must have nominated me without telling me. As I accepted the glass trophy and shook the dean's hand, my eyes found my family in the audience. My mother was beaming. Grant looked genuinely impressed, and my father was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite identify. Not pride, certainly, but perhaps the first flicker of doubt in his long-held assessment of me. After the ceremony, as graduates and families mingled on the lawn, Robert Chen approached our group, extending his hand to my father. "Mr. Wilson, Robert Chen, from Horizon Venture Capital. Your son has built something remarkable. We're expecting great things from ConstructTrack." My father shook his hand automatically, his expression carefully neutral. He always did like playing with computers. Robert looked momentarily taken aback by the dismissive tone, but recovered quickly. "Well, playing has resulted in what we believe will be a 7-figure business within 2 years. You must be very proud." Before my father could respond, my mother suggested we continue the celebration at a nearby restaurant. The tension between Robert's enthusiasm and my father's reservations created an almost visible divide as we walked to our cars. At the restaurant, seated around a table laden with appetizers, no one was eating. The facade finally cracked. My father, after his second scotch, leaned forward and fixed me with the look I'd known all my life, the one that preceded his most cutting remarks. "So you've got some investors excited and won a school award," he said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone at the table to hear. "That's a long way from actual success. Ideas are easy. Execution is hard. You know how many businesses fail in the first year?" Marcus, my mother warned, placing her hand on his arm. He shrugged her off. "The boy needs to hear this. The real world isn't going to coddle him like his professors. You're still the joke, Hale, until you prove otherwise." The table fell silent. Grant stared at his plate. My mother looked on the verge of tears. And I felt a strange calm descend over me. This moment, this exact moment, was one I had imagined countless times over the years. The moment when, despite all evidence to the contrary, my father would reaffirm his unchangeable view of me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my house keys, deliberately jangling them on my finger. "Laugh now," I said quietly, "but I own my home at 22. I have a company with million-dollar potential. I graduated with honors from a program you said I'd drop out of in a semester. I set the keys on the table with a soft clink. Your joke just became the punchline. My father's face flushed red. You think a house and some venture capital make you successful? You haven't proven anything yet. When your little software company crashes and burns, don't come crying to me. Marcus, stop it. My mother's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. Can't you see what Hale has accomplished? Why can't you just be happy for him? Because he needs to understand how the real world works, my father insisted. Business isn't about awards and graduation ceremonies. It's about hard work and survival. And what would you know about successful business practices right now? The words escaped before I could stop them. Grant told me things aren't going well at Wilson Construction. Maybe if you'd been open to modernizing your systems earlier, you wouldn't be losing clients to mistakes and inefficiency. My father's eyes darted to Grant, who had the decency to look guilty. You told him. He needed to know, Grant muttered. The company's in trouble, Dad. We need help. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. I think this celebration is over. Thank you for coming to graduation, but I have a company to run. I turned to leave, then paused. By the way, if Wilson Construction ever decides to join the 21st Century Construct Track, is designed specifically for businesses like yours. But I won't hold my breath waiting for you to admit you need it. As I walked out of the restaurant, I heard my mother calling after me, but I kept going. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt had finally found their release. And while I wasn't proud of how the evening had ended, I couldn't bring myself to go back and smooth things over. Not this time. That night alone in my new house, I thought about the look on my father's face when I jingled those keys. For the first time in my life, I'd seen something in his eyes that had never been there before: uncertainty. The unshakable conviction that I was a joke, a disappointment, had cracked, just a little but enough. And in that small crack lay the possibility of something I'd never dared hope for: change. 1 week after graduation, I was deep in work mode at our small office space. Tyler was testing the mobile version of Construct Track. Andrea was on a call with a potential client, and I was reviewing resumes for our first official hire when my phone rang. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from my hometown. Hale Wilson? I answered, stepping into the hallway for privacy. Hale, this is Richard Barnes. The name took me a moment to place. My father's business manager, a quiet, efficient man who had worked for Wilson Construction since I was a child. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from your mother. Not at all, I replied, curious. Richard had always been kind to me, sneaking me candy from his desk drawer when I visited the office as a kid. What can I do for you? There was a pause before he continued. I'm calling about your father's business. The situation is, well, it's worse than you probably know. We're on the verge of bankruptcy, Hale. The systems we're using simply can't handle the complexity of our current operations, and mistakes are piling up. Clients are leaving, suppliers are demanding payment up front because we've missed so many deadlines. I leaned against the wall, processing this information. Grant had said things were bad, but this sounded dire. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Your brother mentioned your software at our last staff meeting. Said it might be exactly what we need. Your father, well, he wasn't receptive to the idea at first. But yesterday, he asked me to find out more about it. My heart skipped a beat. He did. He would never ask you directly, you understand, Richard continued. His pride won't allow it, but the business is his life's work and the thought of losing it. I think he's finally ready to consider alternatives. After ending the call with a promise to send Richard information about Construct Track, I sat in stunned silence at my desk. The idea that my father might actually need my help, might actually implement my software, was almost too strange to comprehend. That evening, as I was preparing dinner in my new kitchen, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Grant standing on my porch looking uncomfortable. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside, gesturing him in. What brings you here? Grant paced my living room for a moment before stopping to face me. I need to explain some things. About Dad, the business. All of it. Over the next hour, Grant revealed the full extent of Wilson Construction's troubles and his own role in trying to address them. After I came back from Detroit, I could see right away that things were a mess, he explained. Dad was still running everything the same way he did 20 years ago. Paper forms, manual inventory, counts scheduling jobs on a whiteboard. I tried to help modernize, but I'm not a tech guy, and Dad resisted every suggestion. Grant ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from our childhood. I've been trying to hold things together, but I'm not qualified for this hail. I can manage a crew, I can talk to clients, but systems and processes, that's your territory. Why didn't you call me sooner? I asked. Pride, Grant admitted. Mine and Dad's. You were always the smart one, you know. Even when Dad was calling you the joke, I knew you were smarter than me. It was easier to join in with Dad's teasing than admit I was jealous of how your mind works. The confession hung in the air between us, decades of rivalry and resentment, suddenly cast in a new light. Richard Barnes called me today, I said finally. Said Dad might be open to implementing Construct Track. Grant nodded. There's a meeting tomorrow at the office. Dad wants you there. He didn't say it in so many words, but he's asking for your help, Hale. The Wilson construction offices looked smaller than I remembered the once impressive reception area, now showing signs of wear. My father waited in the conference room, flanked by Richard Barnes and two other longtime employees. His face was a mask of professional detachment as I set up my laptop for the demonstration. Construct Track was designed specifically for construction businesses. I began launching into my standard presentation. It integrates inventory management, scheduling, vendor relationships, and client communications in a single intuitive interface. As I moved through the demonstration, I could see the employees leaning forward with interest. Richard was nodding occasionally, making notes. Only my father remained impassive, arms crossed, watching the screen without comment. When I finished, Richard spoke first. This looks like exactly what we need. The mobile functionality would be particularly useful for our site managers. My father cleared his throat. What's this cost? For Wilson Construction. Nothing, I said, meeting his gaze. We're still in beta testing. You'd be helping us refine the product before our official launch. A muscle twitched in my father's jaw. We don't need charity. It's not charity, I countered. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get software that can help save your business. We get valuable feedback from a real construction company. Once we launch commercially, you'll get preferred pricing as an early adopter. Richard and the others exchanged glances, clearly on board with the idea. My father stood up abruptly. I need to think about it. Everyone out except Hale. When the room had emptied, my father remained standing, staring out the window at the equipment yard below. Your mother says I've been too hard on you, he said, without turning around. Says, I never gave you credit for your abilities. I stayed silent, unsure where this was heading. I built this company from nothing, he continued. Started with one truck and a toolbox. Worked 16-hour days for years. Never took a handout from anyone. He turned to face me. And now my son, the one I thought would never amount to much, is offering to save what I built. Do you have any idea how that feels? About as good as being called a joke my entire life, I replied quietly. My father flinched slightly. I pushed you because I thought you needed pushing. Thought you were soft. Turns out you were just different. Building things I didn't understand. It wasn't an apology, not really. But coming from my father, it was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of his misjudgment I was likely to get. I'll implement your software, he said finally. Not because I need your help, but because it makes business sense. If it works, you'll have proven me wrong. If it doesn't, at least we tried. Over the next month, we worked to integrate Construct Track into Wilson Construction's operations. I split my time between my own startup and my father's business, training employees, customizing features, and gradually watching the chaos turn to order. Grant proved surprisingly adept at helping with the transition, translating my technical explanations into terms the construction crews could understand. My mother visited my new house during this period, bringing houseplants and curtains to make it feel like home. As we arranged a potted fern by the front window, she broached the subject we'd both been avoiding. Your father would never admit this, she said carefully, but he's impressed with what you've built. He was up late last night going through the client reports your system generated. Said they showed him problems he didn't know he had. He's still treating me like an outside consultant rather than his son, I observed. My mother sighed. 40 years of being the man who knows everything doesn't change overnight, Hale. But he's trying in his way. He added your company logo to the Wilson Construction website yesterday. Said it was good marketing to show they were using cutting-edge technology. It was a small gesture, but from my father significant. The wall between us hadn't come down entirely, but cracks were forming, letting in glimpses of a relationship that might someday be based on mutual respect rather than disappointment and resentment. As summer progressed, Wilson Construction began to stabilize. The inventory system prevented costly ordering mistakes, scheduling became more efficient, and client satisfaction improved. My father, still unable to directly praise me, instead spoke highly of Construct Track to anyone who would listen, which indirectly was a form of validation I'd never received before. The real breakthrough came in late August. I was working late at the construction office fixing a minor bug in the scheduling module when my father appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use this," he said, placing 1 cup on the desk beside me. He remained standing watching me work. "Your brother says you're some kind of genius with this stuff. Says most software people couldn't work this fast." I looked up, surprised by both the coffee and the comment. "Grant said that." My father nodded. "He's been singing your praises a lot lately. Says the company would have gone under without you stepping in." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "He's right. We were a month away from having to lay people off. Maybe 3 months from closing completely." He sat down heavily in the chair across from me, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. 25 years building this business. And I almost lost it because I was too stubborn to change with the times. Too proud to admit that maybe my college dropout son knew what he was talking about when he kept pushing for technology upgrades. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him, an admission of fallibility that the Marcus Wilson I grew up with would never have allowed himself. "Well," I said, trying to keep my tone light, "looks like the joke saved the day after all." A ghost of a smile touched my father's lips. Maybe the joke was on me all along. 6 months after graduation, the landscape of my life had transformed beyond recognition. Construct Track had officially launched with 15 construction companies already using our software, and more signing up each week. We'd moved to larger offices, hired 6 full-time employees, and were fielding acquisition offers from larger tech companies. Offers we were, for the moment, politely declining. Wilson Construction had not only stabilized, but was thriving with new efficiency, allowing them to take on more projects without increasing overhead. My father had finally embraced the technology, even purchasing tablets for all his site managers so they could access Construct Track from anywhere. Our relationship had evolved into something I wouldn't have believed possible a year earlier. We weren't close exactly, and probably never would be. Too many years of criticism and dismissal had created a distance that couldn't be entirely bridged. But there was respect now, and occasional moments of connection that suggested the possibility of more. My relationship with Grant had undergone an even more dramatic transformation. The competitive dynamic that defined our childhood had given way to a collaborative partnership. He now headed operations at Wilson Construction, while I focused on growing Construct Track, but we consulted each other regularly, each recognizing the other's unique strengths. "Remember when I used to steal your homework and hide it?" Grant asked one evening as we shared beers on my back porch. "What a jerk I was." I laughed. "Remember when I reprogrammed your gaming console to display Grant drools every time you turned it on?" He shook his head, grinning. Guess we both had our moments. Still, I wish I'd been a better brother when we were kids. Might have made things easier with Dad. "Water under the bridge," I replied, and was surprised to realize I meant it. My mother too had changed. With my father's business secure, and the tension between her sons reduced, she seemed to stand taller, speak more freely. She'd started taking art classes at the community center and had joined the board of a local charity. Things she'd always wanted to do, but never quite found the confidence for, while playing peacekeeper in our household. "I should have stood up for you more," she told me during one of her regular visits to my house. "All those years I knew how much his words hurt you, but I was afraid of making things worse." "You did what you could," I assured her. "And look how things turned out. Maybe we all needed to follow our own paths to get here." Perhaps the most unexpected development in my post-graduation life was Sophia. I'd met her at a tech networking event in July, a brilliant UX designer who challenged my thinking about Construct Track's interface and wasn't afraid to tell me when my ideas needed work. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into something more personal, and by fall, she was spending most weekends at my house. "I like that you listen when I critique your work," she told me one night. "Most tech founders I've met have massive egos." I laughed. Hard to develop an ego when you spend your formative years being called the family joke. Sophia frowned. Their loss. Their inability to see your potential doesn't diminish what was always there. Her words stuck with me, illuminating a truth I was still coming to terms with. My worth had never been dependent on my father's recognition of it. It had been there all along, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal itself. As Construct Track expanded beyond local markets and began attracting clients nationwide, Robert Chen arranged meetings with larger investors interested in funding our next growth phase. During one such meeting, a venture capitalist asked about the origin story of the company. "What inspired you to create this particular solution?" she wanted to know. I considered giving the safe professional answer about market gaps and efficiency opportunities. Instead, I found myself telling the truth. "My father runs a construction company that nearly went bankrupt because of outdated systems," I explained. "For most of my life, he called me the joke because I was interested in computers instead of construction. I built Construct Track partly to solve his problems and partly to prove him wrong." The investor nodded thoughtfully. "The best innovations often come from personal motivation. And now his company uses our software and is thriving. And our relationship is evolving. We see each other more clearly now." What I didn't share in that professional setting was the deeper realization I'd come to the years of being underestimated had fostered in me a resilience and determination that became my greatest assets as an entrepreneur. Every dismissive comment, every comparison to my more conventional brother, every prediction of failure, all had fueled a drive to succeed that might never have developed otherwise. Would I have chosen that path of pain and doubt? Of course not. But I had come to recognize that our greatest strengths often emerge from our deepest wounds if we can find the courage to transform them rather than be defined by them. 1 year after graduation, we hosted a company celebration at my home, now fully renovated and feeling truly mine. Employees, investors, family, and friends gathered to mark Construct Track's successful first year. My father arrived late, looking uncomfortable in the crowd of tech industry people, but he came, two-man, a gesture that spoke volumes. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing beside him on the deck, both of us watching the sunset in companionable silence. "Your grandfather would have been proud," he said unexpectedly. "My father. He was an innovator too in his way, always looking for better methods even when tradition said otherwise." "You never told me that before," I said. "Never saw the connection before," he admitted. "Between you and him. Too busy trying to make you fit the mold I thought was right." We lapsed back into silence, but something had shifted. Another small crack in the wall, another glimpse of possibility. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Sophia helped me clean up the kitchen. "Your dad actually smiled at me tonight," she observed. "Progress." "Glacial progress," I agreed, "but movement nonetheless." Being the joke had shaped me in ways both painful and powerful. It had driven me to prove my worth, to build something meaningful, to find my own path. But the real victory wasn't in proving my father wrong. It was in discovering that his opinion had never defined my potential in the first place. The keys to my house, which I'd jangled so defiantly at graduation, now symbolized something beyond material success. They represented the unlocking of a future built on my own terms. One where the joke had the last laugh, not through revenge, but through the quiet power of living well. What's your story of proving someone wrong who never believed in you? Have you ever turned negative expectations into motivation for success? Comment below with your experience, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes, the people who don't believe in you are the ones who push you to achieve more than you ever thought possible. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to turn your own challenges into triumph.